Okay, chapter 3, demand and supply. What are we going to achieve by studying this chapter? Be sure you look at the objectives, and let's dive right in. What's a market?
Any arrangement that enables buyers and sellers to get information and do business with each other.
Any arrangement that brings buyers and sellers together and allows them to conduct business. Think about items that you purchased over this weekend. Whether or not that have been gas, whether or not that have been groceries, clothing. In my case, mint juleps, derby tickets, cigars, everything that goes hand in hand with the horse races. Not just any horse race, but again, the Kentucky Derby. When you went to purchase those items, you went to a store or you went to a merchant, and somebody give me an example of what you bought this weekend.
Baby clothes.
Baby clothes. Okay, where'd you buy them from?
Walmart.
Walmart. Where else could you have went?
Target.
Target.
They got the best prices for shoe kids.
So Target, Walmart, Babies R Us,
Yes.
Amazon.
I buy diapers on Amazon.
Okay, so within the market for baby clothes, you see where there are a lot, and you were not the only person I know buying baby clothes this weekend, but in the environment or in the trade of baby clothes, we'll say of that market, we have buyers and sellers. We have an arrangement where buyers and sellers can get together in order to conduct business. All right, a competitive market is one that has many buyers and sellers. So what we just described was a competitive market. No buyer or seller can influence the price. Within a competitive market, no buyer or seller can prevent another entrant into the market. So if this econ class wanted to come together and start selling baby clothes, we could have an arrangement to where we could do that. Now, Walmart and Target and Amazon and Babies R Us, all four are equally competing for that shopping trip. But all four cannot go in and manipulate the price of the item. If all of the inputs that it took, stitches and cotton and elastic that went into making that baby clothes, none of those merchants can go in and change those prices. Therefore, they cannot go in and change the base price of the baby clothes. They compete on other items, but they cannot manipulate and change that price. Okay, so that is what we call a competitive market. Now, when you went and you bought the baby clothes, if you want to tell a fictitious number, feel free to do so. But how much money did you spend on the clothes?
Well, I got my daughter 2 pairs of shoes.
No, just the amount.
I probably spent $20.
$20. Okay. So let's just say that you bought one item there, shoe, and you paid $20. Okay, that exchange of $20 represents the relative price of a pair of shoes. Excuse me, the money price. So the money price is actually the stated price and what you paid. Now, what is the relative price?
The ratio of its money price to the money price of the next best alternative good.
All right, so the relative price, the ratio of its money price to the money price of the next best alternative. All right, let me give you an example. The money price of coffee. I'll think of things I spent today. All right, coffee and gum. If the cup of coffee is $1, so the relative price of coffee, the money price of coffee is $1, and the money price of a pack of gum is 50 cents. What's the relative price of coffee to gum? The relative price of coffee is equal to 2 packs of gum. So remember, it's the ratio. If coffee is $1 and gum is 50 cents, the relative price of coffee is equal to 2 packs of gum. All right, now what happens when we start to influence some of these behaviors? What can change demand? Inventory. In 1 second, I kicked the cord out. All right, so when some influence on buying plans the other price of the good changes, there's a change in demand for that good. All right, so if the quantity of the good that people plan to buy changes at every price level, we're going to have a new demand curve. And let's look at demand. If we demand something, what is it that we're doing?
We want it.
We want it. In addition to wanting it, what else? We can afford it. And thirdly,
Made a definite plan to buy it.
we intend to buy it. We've made our minds up that we're going to buy it. So we want it, we can afford it, and we plan on buying it. The law of demand states, other things remaining the same, the higher the price of a good, the smaller the quantity demanded. So your standard we're going to do a lot of drawing today. If our y-axis equals price, and we want to put quantity down on the x-axis, the law of demand is going to state that as price increases, what's happening to demand?
Goes down.
And just think of items that you have purchased. So going back to the baby clothes, if $20 was the price of shoes, what would happen if the price raised to 40?
Right on the bottom. Look for a coupon.
Look for a coupon or decrease the amount being demanded. You know, think of new technology. Again, new technology comes out, usually in the beginning is when it's going to carry the steepest price. What happens as the price starts to fall? People will buy more. But as the price rises on an item, the amount demanded is going to decrease. All right, so what are some of the causes of changes in demand?
Substitution effect and income.
Substitution effect and income effect. Okay, the substitution effect. When the relative price of a good or service rises, people seek substitutes for it. So the quantity demanded is going to decrease. Now, I always use, all right, I just read in yesterday, the weekend edition of the Journal. Okay, we're talking about beef prices, specifically grass-fed beef. What happens when, let's just say right now the price of a steak is $15? What would happen? What could we eat if we did not want to put steaks on the grill? Other kinds of meat, chicken, burgers, ultimately dogs. Okay, so the price of steak, these are all substitutes for steak. So as the price of steak starts to increase, individuals, their behavior will be that they would change and start looking at alternatives. These alternatives representing substitutes for that item. The more easily and readily available that substitutes are, the greater the response we see in the amount demanded of steak.
So like generic brand items, would that be like instead of getting like the real SpaghettiOs, I get like the spaghetti shooters, because they're cheaper?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, so do y'all hear that? I didn't know if there is really something called the
I don't
spaghetti
know, but
shooters.
it's some really weird name. Circle O's, yeah.
Circle O's. So instead of SpaghettiOs, we'd have a generic form called Circle O's. Okay, so as the price of SpaghettiOs would increase, there would definitely be a close substitute, Circle O's. I'm going to assume that generic is readily available. So the price, any price change in SpaghettiOs is going to be quicker and more dramatically responded to because of that close substitute. Now the income effect. The income effect says that when the price of a good or service rises relative to income, people cannot afford all the things they previously bought. So the amount demanded will decrease. So again, now let's look at the income effect. You've got a good paying job, and the weekend rolls around, and you're going to invite all your family and friends over. You do. You go down to the local butcher. You buy the beef. You get the grain-fed or grass-fed beef, and you throw it on the grill. Monday morning rolls around, and unfortunately, your job is eliminated. We just witnessed a decrease in income. You plan another party let's just assume you still plan a party the next weekend. What are you going to put on the grill?
Ramen noodles.
Ramen noodles.
Circle O's.
Circle O's. We will put the hot dogs on the grill. Okay, these are all examples of the effects of income. All right, so we looked at the demand curve, and if you refer to figure 3.1 in your text, you're going to see another demand curve. draw that up here. Now, on this curve, I'm going to give data points of A, B, C, D, and E. Now, what's going to happen to illustrate this, and we're going to put, again, price. This is my y-axis, and we're going to put quantity down here. So to illustrate this, that as price rises, we start to see the amount of demand decreasing. How rapidly we see the response to either, we're just going to say how rapidly we see a response to the change in demand, whether that be through substitution, through income, or any other economic factor, that is what's going to determine the slope of the demand curve. But hypothetically, we're going to use this as an example. So we're going to see one that's pretty evenly flowing. Sometimes people refer to the demand curve as also a willingness to pay curve. And economists use this term because it's going to show the amount that individuals, rather than looking at it as the amount demanded, the amount individuals are willing to pay at various prices. And the willingness to pay is going to measure, we're going to call that a marginal benefit. Remember the term marginal. The amount of benefit we would get from an additional increase or decrease, one additional increase or decrease in price. All right, so let's talk about what are some items that can shift this demand curve. And the book gives you 6 points. The first, am I still in viewing angle?
No,
What do you see?
half of what you wrote.
Half of what I wrote.
Go up a little bit. Yep.
You with me?
Yep.
So you see price of relative goods.
Yes.
And we'll talk about each of these, but expected. What's expected in the future? So expected future prices. What's number 3? We just talked about income. 4.
Expected future income and credit.
Expected future income and credit. 5. Population. And 6, preferences. All right, so the price of a relative good. We'll talk about substitutes and complements. And we just talked about substitutes. So now let's focus on a complement. So now we are out at the grill. We have our steaks on. What do you like to serve when you grill steaks? I hear A1. You need to find somebody who's better at the grill.
No, I don't like it, but I know.
Corn on the cob.
Corn on the cob,
Baked potatoes.
baked potatoes,
Mac and cheese.
macaroni and cheese. All right, so if we're right back, if we just suffering from the income effect and we're grilling hot dogs, let's think of ketchup and mustard. Unless you're from Chicago, only think mustard. It's a sin in Chicago to put ketchup on a dog.
Should be unused ketchup, period. It's gross.
All right, so a complement, a good that is used in connection with another good. So what's going to happen when the price of the beef starts to rise? What's going to happen to the price of these complement items? They are going to rise with our price of beef. Now, if the price starts to fall, we're going to expect demand to fall of these other items. The same as demand rises, we're going to see demand rise for the complement items. Expected future prices. Back to our baby shoes. How old's your baby?
2.
2. Going through shoes pretty rapidly, I know.
Mm-hmm.
We find shoes for her every time I turn around. All right, so if you thought that you could lock in, and let's just say the price of baby shoes were going to double next weekend, what might you have done this weekend?
But enough supply now,
Enough to supply you for some
the next couple years.
next couple of years. You would have maximized whatever you could have afforded. You would have bought that because of the expected price. So that, again, if the price of an item is expected to rise, what's that going to do to demand? It's going to shift. All right, now on our demand curve, when we talk about shifting, I'm going to refer to a right shift or left shift. Now, which way do you think I'm going to shift my curve here?
Right.
To the right. So this will be my demand curve. This would be what the new demand curve would look like. When we see income rising, consumers want to buy more of most goods. We shift to the right. We're going to call this a normal good. Now, what would have caused this to shift to the left? What type of good?
Inferior?
An inferior good. A good for which demand decreases as income increases. Give me an example of an inferior good.
Generic toilet paper.
Hot dogs.
What'd you say?
Hot dogs.
There we go. I've heard, it's interesting when you ask that question there, what you get, but anyway, an inferior good, one in which it decreases as income increases. Expected future income and credit. Now again, going car shopping today. I didn't, but assume you were. Think about what your budget, what type of car your budget, if you were to go shopping today, what type of budget your car would allow you to buy. And everybody just go through this exercise in your head. Now, think about if you knew next year or next month you were going to receive a promotion at work that was going to significantly increase your income. That could influence the amount of car or the type of car that you were to purchase. Same thing. If you thought that your job was going to be eliminated next month, that's probably going to shift our demand curve. Same thing with credit. And for credit, I'll talk about homes. Now, the amount of credit that is afforded to us. If anyone purchased a home back in the 2000 and, I'm just gonna say 2002, 3, up through 2000 and hopefully you got it before early 2009, hopefully you got it before 2000, around 2008. But what was happening to the amount of credit? What was happening to the housing market during that period?
Too many loans getting distributed to people who couldn't afford them.
It was doing what?
Too many loans getting, too many loans being granted to people that couldn't afford them.
Too many loans being granted to individuals. Well, specifically, we'll say too much credit inside those loans. You are correct, but too much credit involved in those loans. So people were being extended credit at an increasing rate. And then again, what was that effect on the housing market? A lot of homes got sold, or we'll say a lot of homes got bought. We'll represent the buyer. A lot of homes got bought during that period because as more credit was extended to individuals, those individuals turned around and exercised that credit, and bought more homes. All right, population. The larger the population, the greater is the demand for all goods. Okay, I take the island of Cuba and I take the China Republic. I'm only choosing China and Cuba because that's the smallest economy I know anything about. China's the largest economy I know anything about. Which country do you think demands more goods? China. So population can affect demand. And preferences. People with the same income have different demands if they have different preferences. So individual preferences can influence demand as well. All right, so let's go back to what's going to cause this shifting of the curve. We said that when we shift to the right, we just increase demand. When we shift to the left, what does that represent? A decrease. Any questions? All right, if a firm supplies a good or service, then that firm does what?
Has the resources and technology to produce it.
Has the resources and the technology to produce it.
Can you profit from producing it?
Will profit or can profit from producing it.
And has every intention to produce and sell.
And they have an intention to produce and sell. So remember, if we go back to the demand, when we talked about demand, we said you had to want it. You had to be able to afford it. And you had to have made up your mind that you were going to buy it. So shifting to the other side of the coin, when we are supplying, we have the resources and the technology to supply it. No one's going to supply the item to the market unless they believe they can earn a profit. And third, they are going to have a definite plan in order to supply the market. All right, resources and technology. What do we mean by resources and technology?
I want to say like manufacturers.
Well, let's think of all the resources that we could have in order to supply something. What do you think other than technology? Let's say, what's the most important item? Us. So again, don't forget the human capital portion of this. And I mention this because you might have seen some economic headlines of the unemployment rate in the country and how we are at a low point. So this unemployment numbers start to come down. Quantity to supplied of a good or service, the amount producers plan to sell. Now, what's the law of supply state?
The higher the price of the good, the greater is the quantity supplied.
Other things remaining constant. The higher the price of a good, the greater amount that would be supplied. So remember that second factor. We have to believe we can earn a profit. So as price starts to rise, supply is going to rise with it. Now the supply curve. How's my supply curve going to look?
Opposite of the demand curve.
All right, so we're going to look at it like this. And I'm going to put these same data points we'll put the same data points of A, B, C, D, and E. Now again, what do you see happening in this curve?
It's increasing, like the higher the price, the more quantity you're supplying.
So if we're going to let the Y, and by this time I'm going to assume you know what's the Y curve, or the Y axis. So we're going to put price and Q for quantity. So as price starts to rise, the quantity supplied is also rising. So what are some items that's going to change supply?
The prices of factors of production.
All right, so factors of production. When supply increases, which way am I going to shift? And when supply decreases, we're going to shift to the left. All right, now each time we have a change to a factor influencing supply, remember, we're going to have a whole new supply curve. All right, so the 6 main factors that can change supply are
Prices.
prices, factors of production,
Price of related goods produced.
price of related goods,
Expected future prices.
expected future prices,
The number of suppliers.
number of suppliers,
Technology.
and
And state of nature.
technology.
And state of nature.
And state of nature. The
You
one,
separated the one.
yeah, number 1 and 2 belong together.
All right, so we're gonna put down here, state of nature. And we'll tie these two together. All right, prices, the factors of production. What are we referring to?
Cost put into an item, to make that.
Please repeat, I couldn't hear you.
The cost that goes into producing the item.
The
assembly.
cost that goes into producing an item. So if the price of a factor of production rises, what's gonna happen to my supply curve?
Goes
And
right.
decrease. Decrease?
Decreases the supply and shifts the curve.
Shifts the curve to the left. Okay. Price of related goods produced. Let's again look at a substitute in production. The supply of a good increases if the price of a substitute in production falls. Someone give me an example.
So maybe using one kind of gas is more expensive than using another type of gas. So you go use the cheaper one to produce the same product.
I was gonna say Circle O's may go up and SpaghettiOs can go down.
Circle O's go up. You're saying the price
Goes up, yes.
of Circle O's goes up. What's gonna happen to the price of SpaghettiOs?
They're gonna be 2 for $1.
You think they're gonna go on sale? Who will agree with that statement? The generic SpaghettiOs, Circle O's, rises in price. What's gonna happen to SpaghettiOs? It's going to decrease. So what's gonna happen to the amount being supplied? Is that going to attract? Would you go in and start producing an item that was showing decreased sales?
It depends on your timing.
True.
Depend on what?
Your taste, because like there are some people who only buy.
Think of the suppliers. Now, remember, we're thinking of the suppliers.
Okay, so let's say you got like the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 7. So they stopped making as many iPhone 6s so they can make more iPhone 7s, but they look the exact same and use all the exact same products. Could that be an example?
price of, you're using an iPhone 6 and 7.
Yeah, like, let's say they're the exact same, like, nothing is different.
Well, we can't say the 6 and 7 are the same.
Well, 6 and 6S. The only difference is like the color, but they're using the same ultimate resources.
Someone other than Indiana, let's join in on this. Give me an example. I just blocked that because there would be a difference in. I'm only trying to focus on a clear substitute for an item. So I like the SpaghettiOs and Cheerios or Circle O's.
Now, those are Honey Nut Scooters, I do know that.
All right. Wisconsin, what do you have?
Are you trying to say that like the substitute cost is?
No, I'm just saying what's gonna happen if, and we'll use this example of SpaghettiOs, and an item I'm even unsure of, but I'm taking their word for it. Circle O's. If the price of Cheerio, if the price of SpaghettiOs increases, what's gonna happen to the price of Circle O's?
Increase.
Well, their price would go down.
Go down.
Right.
Because no one's buying.
We agree? All right, good job. Now, complements. Goods are complements in production if they must be produced together. So what's going to happen when we start to see a rise in a good? What's going to happen to the complement?
It'll increase.
It will increase. Because remember, they have to be made in tandem.
Mustard and ketchup.
All right, expected future prices. We should be able to go through this one a little quicker. And again, applying what we just looked at in demand, you're gonna direct more of this conversation. How can changes in expected future prices change supply?
Well, the supply will go up either up or down.
Well, it will go up or down, but give me an example.
Like gas. Typically, gas prices go up in the summer
And holidays.
and holidays, and then they stay low every year.
Okay, so gasoline prices. The price of gasoline rises.
So like before the holiday,
Okay, but what's gonna happen to my supply curve?
price
Shift
goes
We
up.
just set a new price, so we're gonna draw a new curve. How am I gonna shift?
Left.
Left. Good job. Technology. Well, no, we got left off the number of suppliers. So the number of suppliers, the larger the number of suppliers of a good, the greater is the supply. So an increase in the number of suppliers shifts the supply curve right. As more suppliers come in, we drive up the supply level. So to increase, remember, we're going to shift to the right. Technology.
That'll make us more profitable. If they're working like they're supposed to.
It will make us more profitable.
Because usually they increase productivity.
All right, advances in technology creates new products and lowers the cost of existing products. So advances in technology is going to do what to supply?
Increase.
Increase. And if we're going to increase it, which way are we shifting it?
Right.
To the right. The state of nature includes all of the natural forces that influence production. For example, the weather. Now, here in southern Indiana, when the news headline flashes up and says a tornado is on the way or high winds are on the way, what happens to the shelves at Kroger?
Eggs, bread, and milk.
Eggs, bread, and milk are gone.
French toast.
I never understood that.
I will save that for another conversation, but I use that and notice I'm smiling. But there is a force of nature that's influencing supply. So with bad weather coming on, in that example, is my curve going to shift to the right or the left? To the left. To the left. All right, so let's look at items that, if I draw these same data points, so that you can kind of visualize. So that'll give you a little better viewing of what's going to shift and how that's going to look. Now, before we talk about shifting in the supply, let's just talk about, rather than shifting the curve, let's talk about movement along the curve. So thus far, we've talked about factors that would change price, and when changing price, remember, we have a new curve. But what are some, let's talk right now about just moving along the curve. So in order to hold along the curve, what's going to cause this?
Price change.
Price change.
All right, refer over to figure 3.6 if you're looking at your textbook. And when we're shifting along this curve, we are creating a distinction between the change in supply versus the quantity supplied. So now I'm only referencing a change in supply. In each of these examples, we talked about what was the change on the quantity demanded, or excuse me, the quantity supplied. But now I'm just looking at changes in supply. So if we look when the price of the good changes and other influences on sellers' plans remain the same, the quantity supplies shifted. Now that's what we just referred to. Price was remaining and other factors were weighted in. And when we factored in these 6 items, we influenced the quantity. But if price remains the same, but some other influence occurs, supply changes. So what could be another factor?
So let's say they're always selling stuff for $2. Then like they have a recall on cheese because it's got listeria and they got to swipe out some of their supply. that would cause it to shift left, wouldn't it? They're not even, because they're not gonna change the price on the cheese, they're just gonna get rid of some of it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would still include that up to something here. Let's just say that I don't think the textbook will give a good, just know here where we looked at, when we shift the curve, we're referring to changes in quantity. But if I just have movement along the same curve, at this, I'm only changing the amount supplied at that same price. If I assign values and I have price 1, 2, 3, 4, and $5, then at any five as well. At point A, at $1, but if I move to this point, and we'll call it $1.50, this is going to illustrate a rise in supply. Up to point C, 2.25, what's happening to the amount supplied? It's increasing. So if the only thing I'm changing is price, I'm going to have movement along the curve. All right. Now, what's going to happen? Let's put all of these, let's marry these two items. What do I call this point? Equilibrium. And who wants to tell me what is equilibrium?
It's the situation in which opposing forces balance each other.
Position in which opposing forces balance each other. In this example, what are my opposing forces?
Price and quantity?
Supply and demand. Okay, so at this point, in economics, we'll call this market equilibrium. And at this point, the amount being supplied is balancing with the amount being demanded. Now let's look at some changes here. Refer to figure 3.7 in your text. And our price is going to go from 50 cents. $0.50 to 3, and we're given at 50 cents. What's my demand? 50 cents, 22 is demanded. And what's being supplied? 0. So everybody's with me on this chart. Now, if the price is $2, what do we have? What's our equilibrium price here?
$1.50%.
$1.50. So where would I find $2? Up in here. Up to, keep it up here to $2. Okay, so this is going to represent at $2. And what do I call that? We have a surplus. So the amount being demanded above, or excuse me, the amount being supplied above market equilibrium is going to be a surplus. And when we have a surplus, what effect do we expect? What would happen to supply at $2? You would have a surplus. So now what would happen to the amount being supplied? It's going to decrease. In order to erase this surplus, it's going to decrease. Now, what if I come down here and we'll set it at $1? So here we have a shortage. What will happen here?
You gotta step it up, start pumping out some energy bars.
What's going to happen to supply?
Increase.
You gotta have to decrease. It's gonna increase. Right? Well, no, you got a shortage. Technically, that means you got less. Right?
So we have a shortage.
For the price
First, what's going to happen to price?
decrease. Yeah, the price would decrease in the quantity.
Now, if price starts to decrease, look, I'm going to come back down into here, which is just going to increase my shortage.
So you're wanting to up your price to make up for the
Well,
lack of supply.
as price rises, what's going to happen to the supply levels?
Build.
It's going to build. Supply levels will build. More people will start to produce. More people will start to supply. As more people start to supply, we will drive up to market equilibrium. Now, at this point, if supply levels continue to increase, remember, we're going to go back up into here. And at that point, what's going to happen? price is gonna start to decrease. What's gonna happen to the amount of suppliers when price starts to decrease? You look confused.
Well, no, only because you said that there's a shortage, so if there's a shortage, and then you were talking about, of course, there's a demand or whatever, but the supply, you just said that there was a shortage, so I'm sorry, I was thinking shortage, I'm thinking there's not enough.
There is not enough.
Okay. So I was getting a little confused, I'm sorry.
So price will start to increase. Just think if there being a shortage on a good,
Yeah,
what happens to price?
it goes up. It goes up.
It will increase. Okay,